The envelope trembled in Willa Jefferson's hands as she stared at the red lettering stamped across the front. Final notice. Rent was 3 weeks overdue, her car needed new tires she couldn't afford, and the medical bills from her son's emergency room visit last month were piling up faster than she could count. She pressed her forehead against the kitchen counter of their tiny apartment, willing herself not to cry. 5-year-old Mason was in the next room watching cartoons, and he didn't need to see his mother fall apart. Not again. She'd been working double shifts at the diner for months, but it still wasn't enough. Her ex-husband had vanished 2 years ago, leaving nothing but empty promises and a forwarding address that didn't exist. Some days Willa felt like she was drowning in quicksand, fighting just to keep both their heads above water. The phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. Normally she'd ignore it, assuming another debt collector, but something made her answer. "Is this Willa Jefferson?" A woman's voice, professional and warm. "Yes, this is she. My name is Patricia Chen. I'm a hiring manager for private household staff. Your resume came across my desk through the employment agency you registered with last week. Are you still seeking full-time work?" Willa's heart jumped. "Yes, absolutely." "Excellent. I have a position that might interest you. It's a live-in housekeeper role at a private estate. The employer is willing to provide separate accommodations for you and your son, which I understand from your application is an important consideration. The salary is $75,000 annually, plus benefits, room and board included." Willa nearly dropped the phone. 75,000. That was more than double what she made now, and without rent to pay, she could actually save money, pay off her debts, maybe even put something away for Mason's future. "What's the catch?" she asked, unable to believe something this good could be real. Patricia laughed gently. "No catch. The employer is particular about his privacy and runs a large household. He needs someone reliable, honest, and capable of managing a complex schedule. He also specifically requested someone who would be comfortable with him occasionally working from home. The previous housekeeper retired after 20 years, so he's looking for someone who wants stability." "I want stability more than anything," Willa said, meaning every word. "Perfect. Can you come in for an interview tomorrow morning? 10 o'clock at the Grayson estate just outside the city." Willa wrote down the address with shaking hands, thanked Patricia profusely, and ended the call. Then she walked into the living room where Mason was sprawled on their threadbare couch, his dark curls falling into his eyes as he giggled at the cartoon characters on screen. "Hey, buddy," she said, sitting beside him. "How would you feel about moving somewhere new? Somewhere with a big yard where you could play outside?" Mason looked up at her with those enormous brown eyes that always reminded her of her own father. "Would there be room for a dog?" She laughed despite everything. "I don't know about that yet, but maybe, someday." He threw his arms around her neck. "Then I want to go. Can we go now?" "Not yet. Mama has to do an interview first, but keep your fingers crossed for us, okay?" That night, after Mason fell asleep, Willa pulled out her only professional outfit, a navy dress she'd bought at a thrift store for court dates with her ex. She pressed it carefully, polished her worn flats, and tried to imagine what kind of person owned an estate large enough to need a live-in housekeeper. The next morning, she dropped Mason off at her neighbor's apartment. Mrs. Chen had agreed to watch him for a few hours and drove her rattling car toward the address Patricia had given her. As she left the city behind, the neighborhoods grew progressively more upscale. By the time she turned onto the private road leading to the Grayson estate, her palms were sweating. The house that appeared at the end of the tree-lined drive wasn't a house at all. It was a mansion, all stone and glass and elegant architecture that looked like something out of a magazine. Willa parked her embarrassing car next to a sleek black Mercedes and tried to calm her racing heart. Patricia met her at the front door, a petite woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a warm smile. "Willa, welcome. Come in." The interior was even more intimidating than the exterior. Soaring ceilings, marble floors, artwork that probably cost more than Willa would make in a lifetime. But it was also surprisingly warm, with comfortable furniture and family photos scattered throughout. "Mr. Grayson is finishing up a call," Patricia said, leading her through the house. "He should be with us shortly. Can I get you some coffee or tea? Water would be great, thank you." They settled in a bright kitchen that was bigger than Willa's entire apartment. Patricia asked her questions about her work history, her experience with household management, her schedule flexibility. Willa answered honestly, explaining about Mason, about her situation, about how desperately she needed this opportunity. "I can tell you're genuine," Patricia said. "That matters a lot to Mr. Grayson. He's had people try to take advantage of his position before. He needs someone real." Footsteps echoed in the hallway, and then a man appeared in the doorway. Willa's breath caught. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe mid-30s, with dark hair, sharp features, and the kind of presence that filled a room without him saying a word. He wore jeans and a white button-down with the sleeves rolled up, somehow managing to look both casual and commanding at once. "Sorry to keep you waiting," he said, and his voice was deep, measured, his eyes a striking shade of gray-green fixed on Willa. "I'm Theo Grayson." She stood, offering her hand. "Willa Jefferson, thank you for meeting with me." His handshake was firm and brief. "Patricia speaks highly of you. Let's talk." He led them to a study lined with bookshelves, gesturing for her to sit in one of the leather chairs across from his desk. Patricia excused herself, leaving them alone. "I'll be direct," Theo said, leaning back in his chair. "I built my company from nothing, and it requires a lot of my time and attention. I'm the CEO of Grayson Industries. We manufacture renewable energy components. When I'm home, I need this place to run smoothly so I can focus on work and not on whether there's food in the refrigerator or if someone's coming to fix the broken dishwasher. The previous housekeeper, Margaret, handled everything. I need someone who can do the same." "I understand," Willa said. "I'm used to juggling multiple responsibilities. At the diner where I work, I manage inventory, scheduling, customer service, and maintenance issues all at once. I'm organized and I don't mind hard work." "Patricia mentioned you have a son, Mason. He's 5. She met his eyes steadily. "I won't pretend he doesn't exist or that he won't be a factor. But I keep my personal life separate from my work. He's well behaved and he'll stay in our quarters when you're home unless you say otherwise." Something flickered across Theo's face, surprise, maybe, or respect. "I'm not asking you to hide him. If you live here, this is your home too. I just need to know that you can handle the responsibilities of the position." "I can," she said with absolute certainty. "I've been handling impossible situations for years. This job would actually make my life easier, not harder. That makes me invested in doing it right." Theo studied her for a long moment. Then he stood. "Let me show you the cottage where you'd be staying." They walked through manicured gardens to a small building behind the main house. Inside was a 2-bedroom cottage with a full kitchen, a cozy living room, and large windows overlooking a pond. "It's beautiful," Willa breathed. "Mason would love it here. He could play outside safely, have his own room for the first time in his life." The main house has 6 bedrooms, 7 bathrooms, a home office, a gym, and entertainment spaces, Theo said. "I entertain clients occasionally, maybe once a month. Otherwise, it's usually just me. I need someone to manage cleaning, laundry, grocery shopping, meal preparation, and general household maintenance. Margaret had a system. I can share her documentation with you. I'm a fast learner, Willa assured him. They walked back to the main house in silence. In the study, Theo picked up a folder from his desk and handed it to her. This is a formal offer letter. The salary, benefits, and expectations are all outlined. If you want the job, it's yours. You can move in this weekend. Willa opened the folder with trembling hands and scanned the documents. The salary was real. Health insurance included, dental and vision, a retirement plan. It was more than she dared to hope for. Yes, she said. Absolutely yes. Thank you, Mr. Grayson. You won't regret this. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Call me Theo. And I hope you won't regret it either. That weekend, Willa packed up their meager belongings. It took less than 3 hours and drove Mason to their new home. His eyes went wide as saucers when he saw the cottage. We get to live here, he whispered, as if speaking too loud might make it disappear. We do, she confirmed, laughing at his excitement as he raced from room to room, declaring the smaller bedroom as his own. Over the next few weeks, Willa settled into a routine. She woke early, prepared breakfast for Theo before he left for his office downtown, then spent her days cleaning, organizing, and learning the rhythms of the household. Patricia had left detailed notes, and Willa studied them like textbooks, determined to prove herself worthy of this opportunity. Theo was polite but distant, usually buried in work even when he was home. He took his meals in his office most evenings, barely seeming to notice when she left dinner on his desk. Willa told herself it was better this way. Professional boundaries were important. Mason started kindergarten at the local school, riding the bus that stopped right at the end of the estate's driveway. Every afternoon when he came home, he'd burst into the cottage with stories about his new friends, his teacher, the books they were reading. Willa's heart swelled seeing him so happy. One evening, about a month after they'd moved in, Willa was in the main house preparing dinner when she heard a crash from Theo's office. She rushed down the hall and knocked on the door. "Everything okay?" "Fine," came his clipped response. She hesitated, then opened the door anyway. Theo was standing amid shattered glass, a cut on his hand dripping blood onto papers scattered across the floor. "That's not fine," she said, striding into the room. "Sit down. Where's your first aid kit?" "Willa, I can handle it. Sit," she repeated firmly. "You're bleeding everywhere." To her surprise, he sat. She found the first aid kit in his desk drawer and cleaned the cut efficiently, her hands steady despite her racing heart. This close, she could smell his cologne, something woodsy and expensive. "It's not deep," she said, "but you should be more careful." "I threw the glass," he admitted. "Lost my temper, stupid." She looked up at him. "Bad day, bad month. We lost a major contract. Someone on my board is trying to undermine me, and I just found out my ex-girlfriend sold a story about me to a tabloid." He laughed bitterly. "I sound like a cliché." "You sound human," Willa said, wrapping gauze around his hand. "Everyone has limits." "What's yours?" he asked suddenly. "What pushes you to the breaking point?" She thought about the day she'd found out her ex was gone for good, about the nights she'd cried herself to sleep worrying about Mason, about the constant weight of keeping everything together alone. "I don't have the luxury of breaking," she said simply. "So I don't." Theo's eyes searched her face. "That's why Patricia hired you, that strength. I can see it." The moment stretched between them, fragile and unexpected. Then Mason's voice called from the hallway. He'd wandered over from the cottage looking for her. "Mama, are you here?" "In the office, sweetheart," she called back, pulling away from Theo. Mason appeared in the doorway, then stopped when he saw Theo. His expression grew uncertain. "Hey there," Theo said, his voice gentling. "You must be Mason. I'm Theo." Mason inched closer to Willa. Did you get hurt?" "Just a little accident," Theo said. "But your mom fixed me right up. She's pretty good at that, huh?" "Mama's good at everything," Mason said with absolute certainty, and Willa's heart melted. "I believe it," Theo said, and the look he gave her made her skin warm. After that night, something shifted. Theo started eating dinner in the kitchen instead of his office, asking about her day, telling her about his. Mason gradually warmed up to him, especially after Theo showed him the koi pond and let him help feed the fish. Willa tried not to read too much into it. Theo was just being kind, being friendly. She was his employee, but she couldn't help noticing the way his eyes followed her when she moved around the kitchen, or how his expression softened when Mason chattered about school. One Saturday morning, Willa was in the cottage doing laundry when Mason ran in, breathless with excitement. "Mama, Theo said he's going to the farmer's market and asked if we want to come. Can we, please?" She froze. "Sweetheart, I'm sure he just meant you." "I have work to do," he specifically said, "both of you." Theo's voice came from the doorway. He stood there in jeans and a casual jacket, looking unfairly handsome. "It's your day off, Willa. You don't have to work. And honestly, I have no idea what to buy. Margaret always handled the shopping. You're a billionaire and you don't know how to shop for groceries." She teased before she could stop herself. His eyes glinted with amusement. "Guilty. Will you help me?" Mason was already putting on his shoes, making the decision for her. 20 minutes later, they were walking through the bustling farmer's market, Mason between them holding both their hands. It felt dangerously like a family. Willa showed Theo how to pick the best produce, how to negotiate with vendors, which stalls had the freshest bread. He watched her with focused attention, asking questions, occasionally laughing when she got particularly passionate about the quality of tomatoes. "You really care about this," he observed. "Food is important," she said. "When I was really broke before I got the job with you, there were nights I went hungry so Mason could eat. You don't forget that. You don't take good food for granted." Theo's expression grew serious. "You never told me things were that bad." "You never asked," she said lightly, trying to keep it from getting too heavy. "Besides, it doesn't matter now. We're okay now." "Because of me," he said quietly. "Because you gave me a chance," she corrected. "I'm the one doing the work." "You are," he agreed. "You're incredible, Willa. I hope you know that." Before she could respond, Mason tugged on Theo's hand. "Look, puppies." Indeed, someone was showing small dogs in the corner of the market, and Mason was already gravitating toward them like a magnet. "He's obsessed with dogs," Willa explained. "Asks me every week if we can get one." Theo crouched down beside Mason, who was gently petting a golden retriever puppy. "You like dogs?" "I love them," Mason said reverently. "But Mama says we can't afford one." Willa's cheeks flushed. "Mason, what if the dog lived at the big house?" Theo said suddenly. "I've been thinking about getting a dog anyway, and you could help me take care of it, Mason. Would that work?" Mason's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Really? Really, really?" Willa grabbed Theo's arm, pulling him aside while Mason stayed occupied with the puppies. "You can't do that. You can't just buy a dog because my son wants one." "Why not?" Theo challenged. "The estate is huge. A dog would be good security. And honestly, the place feels empty most of the time. Maybe having something alive and energetic around would be good for all of us." "Theo, unless you're opposed to dogs," he said. "Then obviously we won't," she sighed. "I'm not opposed to dogs, I just don't want Mason to think he can have whatever he asks for." "He's not asking for it," Theo pointed out. "I'm offering, there's a difference." 2 hours later, they drove home with a golden retriever puppy curled up in Mason's lap. They named her Daisy, and she became an instant fixture in their lives. Mason spent hours playing with her in the gardens, And even Willa had to admit the puppy brought a warmth to the estate that had been missing before. Theo, meanwhile, seemed to transform around Mason and Daisy. The serious, intense CEO became someone who got down on the floor to play, who laughed freely, who seemed genuinely happy in a way Willa suspected he hadn't been in a long time, and she was falling for him. God help her, she was falling hard. It happened in small moments. The way he always asked if she'd eaten when he found her working late. How he'd started buying her favorite coffee creamer without her mentioning it. The evening she came back from tucking Mason into bed and found Theo asleep on the couch, Daisy curled up beside him, and her heart had squeezed so tight she could barely breathe. But she kept her feelings locked down. She had too much to lose. This job, this home, the stability Mason finally had, she couldn't risk it all because she developed an inconvenient crush on her billionaire employer. Then came the night of the charity gala. Theo had mentioned it in passing, some event he had to attend for his company. Willa was preparing his tuxedo, making sure everything was perfect when he appeared in the kitchen looking uncomfortable. "I need a favor," he said, "of course." "What do you need?" "A date," he said bluntly. "My ex is going to be there with her new boyfriend, and the board members are going to be circling like sharks. I need someone I can trust beside me. Someone real. Would you consider coming with me?" Willa's heart stopped. "Theo, I'm your housekeeper." "I can't. You're not just my housekeeper," he interrupted. "You're my friend, at least I hope you are, and I trust you more than anyone else in my life right now. Please, Willa." I know it's a lot to ask. She should say no. Every logical bone in her body screamed to refuse. But the vulnerability in his eyes undid her. "I don't have anything appropriate to wear to a gala," she said weakly. Relief flooded his face. "That's not a problem. Patricia can help with that. Is that a yes?" "It's a yes," she heard herself say. "But Mason," Patricia offered to stay with him. "He'll be safe, I promise." The next evening, Willa stood in front of the mirror in her cottage, barely recognizing herself. Patricia had arranged for a personal shopper who'd brought a selection of gowns. The one Willa wore was deep emerald green, elegant and sophisticated without being ostentatious. Her dark hair was swept up, and someone had done her makeup so skillfully she looked like a different person. When she stepped out and saw Theo waiting by his car, his expression stopped her in her tracks. He stared at her like she'd stolen the air from his lungs. "You look." He seemed to struggle for words. "Willa, you're stunning." "I feel ridiculous," she admitted. "You shouldn't." He offered his arm. Ready. The gala was overwhelming. Hundreds of wealthy, powerful people filled a ballroom that probably cost more to rent for one night than Willa used to make in a year. She felt out of place despite the expensive dress, but Theo never left her side. He introduced her simply as Willa Jefferson, never mentioning her role in his household. She fielded questions about how they met with vague answers about mutual friends. Theo's hand stayed warm and steady on the small of her back all evening, guiding her through conversations, protecting her from the more predatory socialites. Then his ex-girlfriend appeared. Brittany was blonde, polished, and looked at Willa like she was dirt on her shoe. "Theo, darling," she purred. "Who's your little friend?" "This is Willa," Theo said coolly. "And she's far better company than you ever were." Brittany's eyes flashed. "Still bitter about the article. I told them the truth." "You told them lies for money," Theo corrected. "There's a difference." "Now, if you'll excuse us, we were just leaving." He guided Willa away, his jaw tight with anger. They ended up on a balcony overlooking the city, the sounds of the party muffled behind the glass doors. "I'm sorry," Theo said. "I shouldn't have subjected you to that." "You protected me from her," Willa pointed out. "And honestly, she seems awful. How did you ever date her?" He laughed roughly. "I clearly have terrible judgment in women." "Had," Willa said softly. Past tense. He turned to face her fully, his eyes intense. Willa, I need to tell you something. Her heart started racing. Okay. This isn't just about tonight. It's not just about needing a date to avoid my ex or impress the board. I asked you here because spending time with you is the best part of my day, has been for weeks now. He stepped closer. You walked into my life when everything felt hollow and pointless, and suddenly, I have reasons to come home early. I find excuses to be in the kitchen when you're cooking dinner. I've started leaving my office door open just so I can hear you and Mason laughing in another room. Theo, she whispered. I know it's complicated. I know I'm technically your employer and there's a power dynamic and you might not feel the same way, but I needed you to know. I'm falling for you, Willa. Actually, that's not accurate. I've already fallen. I'm completely gone for you. Tears pricked her eyes. You can't say things like that to me. Why not, if they're true? Because I've been trying so hard not to feel this way, she said, her voice breaking. Because every time you smile at Mason or help him with his homework or play with Daisy, my heart breaks a little more. Because I wake up thinking about you and fall asleep thinking about you and I know I shouldn't. You're a billionaire, Theo. You own companies and estates and could have anyone you want. I'm a single mom who was barely surviving before you hired me. This can't work. Why can't it? He challenged, taking her hands. Give me one real reason. Because what happens when it ends? I lose my job, my home. Mason loses the first stable environment he's ever known. I can't take that risk. Then we don't let it end, Theo said fiercely. Willa, I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I don't care about the circumstances of how we met. I care that you're strong and kind and funny and real. I care that you make me want to be a better man. I care that Mason looks at me like I hung the moon when I'm just being myself around him. I want this. I want you and I want him and I want us to be a family, if you'll let me. She was crying now, unable to stop the tears. What if you change your mind? I won't. He cupped her face gently, thumbs wiping away her tears. But if you need time, if you need proof, I'll wait. I'll wait as long as you need. I don't want to wait, she whispered. I'm terrified, but I don't want to wait. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Willa melted into him, letting herself believe for the first time that maybe, just maybe, this could be real. They left the gala early, drove home in comfortable silence, their hands linked on the center console. When they pulled up to the estate, Patricia emerged from the main house with a knowing smile. Mason's sound asleep, she reported. You two have a good evening. The best, Theo said, looking at Willa like she was the most precious thing in the world. After Patricia left, Theo walked Willa to her cottage door. I should let you get some rest. Theo, she said, catching his hand before he could leave. Thank you for tonight, for everything, for seeing me. You're impossible to miss, he said simply, kissing her forehead. Sleep well, Willa. The next morning, Mason bounded into the kitchen where Willa was making breakfast to find Theo already there, feeding Daisy. You're here early, Mason observed. I wanted to see you guys before work, Theo said. Actually, I wanted to ask you something, Mason. Mason climbed onto a stool. What? How would you feel if I spent more time with you and your mom? Like if we did things together. As a family, Mason's eyes went wide. Like a real family, are you going to be my dad? Willa's breath caught. Theo looked at her, silent question in his eyes. She nodded slightly, giving him permission. I'd like to be, Theo said seriously. If that's okay with you. I know I'm not your biological father, but I care about you a whole lot, buddy. And I care about your mom. I want to be here for both of you if you'll have me. Mason launched himself at Theo, wrapping small arms around his neck. Yes, I want that. Can Daisy be our family dog? Theo laughed, hugging him back. Absolutely. Over the following months, they built something beautiful together. Theo cut back his hours at work, delegating more so he could be home for dinners and bedtimes. They established routines: Saturday morning pancakes, Sunday afternoon hikes with Daisy, evening reading time with Mason curled up between them on the couch. Willa still technically worked as his housekeeper, but it felt less like a job and more like simply taking care of their home. Theo hired additional help for the heavy cleaning and started insisting she was more of a household manager than anything else, with a salary increase to match. They were careful around Mason at first, not wanting to confuse him, but the boy was sharp. He noticed the way Theo looked at his mother, the way they'd hold hands when they thought he wasn't watching, the way they gravitated toward each other like magnets. "Are you and Mama dating?" he asked Theo one evening while they were building a puzzle together. Theo glanced at Willa, who nodded encouragingly. "We are. Does that bother you?" "No," Mason said cheerfully. "I think Mama deserves someone nice. You're nice. And you already live together, so it's not like you'll have to move." They both laughed at his pragmatic assessment. 6 months after that first kiss on the balcony, Theo took Willa back to the farmer's market where they'd gone that first Saturday together. Mason was with Patricia for the day, and Willa sensed something was different. Theo seemed nervous, which was unusual for him. They walked through the stalls, purchasing vegetables and bread like they did most weekends. Then Theo led her to a quiet spot by the fountain at the market center. "This is where I knew," he said. "Knew what?" "That I was in love with you. It was that day, watching you haggle with the tomato vendor, so passionate about getting the best price. Mason was holding my hand and calling me to look at something every 2 seconds, and you were laughing, and I just thought, this is what happiness feels like. This is what home feels like." He took both her hands. "I've spent my whole life building things, my company, my reputation, my fortune. But none of it meant anything until you walked into my life. You and Mason gave me purpose. You gave me a real reason to come home every day." He dropped to one knee and Willa's heart stopped. "Willa Jefferson, you are the strongest, most incredible person I've ever met. You've survived things that would have broken other people, and you've done it with grace and love and unwavering devotion to your son. I want to spend the rest of my life showing you that you never have to be that strong alone anymore. You'll always have me beside you, supporting you, loving you." He pulled out a velvet box, opening it to reveal a stunning diamond ring. "Will you marry me?" She was crying again, happy tears streaming down her face. "Yes. Yes, Theo, of course yes." He slipped the ring on her finger and stood, pulling her into a kiss that felt like coming home. Around them, market-goers applauded, but Willa barely heard them. Her entire world had narrowed to this man, this moment, this perfect promise of a future she'd never dared to dream about. When they told Mason that evening, he whooped with joy and immediately started planning the wedding. "Can Daisy be in it? And can I be the ring bearer? And will we all live in the big house together now?" "Yes to all of that," Theo assured him, ruffling his hair. "You're going to be my son officially. I'm going to adopt you if that's what you and your mom want." Mason looked at Willa with shining eyes. "Really? Theo would be my real dad." "He's already your real dad in every way that matters," Willa said softly. "But yes, it would be official. Is that what you want?" "More than anything," Mason breathed. The wedding was small and intimate, held in the gardens of the estate on a perfect autumn afternoon. Mason did serve as ring-bearer, with Daisy walking beside him wearing a bow tie. Patricia cried through the entire ceremony. Some of Theo's closest friends from work attended, along with a few of Willa's friends from the diner, who kept whispering about how her life was like a fairy tale. But it didn't feel like a fairy tale to Willa. Fairy tales were fantasies. This was real, the man standing across from her with tears in his eyes as he vowed to love her forever. the little boy beaming in the front row, the dog trying to steal bacon from the appetizer table. It was messy and imperfect and absolutely everything she'd ever wanted. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Theo kissed her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. The guests cheered. Mason rushed up to hug them both, and they stood there, the three of them wrapped together, finally a complete family. The adoption paperwork went through 2 months later. Theo had insisted on hiring the best family lawyer in the state, and they'd expedited everything. On the day the judge finalized it, Mason officially became Mason Jefferson Grayson, and Theo became his legal father. In the courtroom, when the judge handed them the final documents, Theo looked at Mason and said, "I promise I will spend every day earning the privilege of being your dad." Mason hugged him fiercely. "You already did." Life settled into a beautiful rhythm after that. Willa had never imagined she could be this happy. She woke up every morning in Theo's arms in the master bedroom of the main house they now shared. Mason had his own room down the hall, decorated exactly how he wanted it, with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling and posters of his favorite superheroes. Theo was an amazing father. He attended every school event, helped with homework, coached Mason's little league team despite knowing nothing about baseball initially. He was patient and present and loving in ways that made Willa fall more in love with him every single day. For his part, Theo seemed transformed by their family. His colleagues noticed that he was less rigid, more willing to delegate, better at work-life balance. He started a program at his company offering child care assistance and better parental leave policies, inspired by Willa's stories of how hard it had been to manage work and single motherhood. "You changed me," he told her one night as they sat on their bedroom balcony watching the sunset. "Before you, I was just going through the motions, building a company, making money, but not really living. You taught me what actually matters." "We taught each other," Willa said, nestling into his side. "You taught me that I deserve good things, that asking for help isn't weakness, that love doesn't always end in disappointment." He kissed the top of her head. "Never. I'm in this forever, Willa. You're stuck with me." "Good," she said, smiling, "because I'm not going anywhere." 2 years after their wedding, on a crisp spring morning, Willa stood in the bathroom of their home staring at a positive pregnancy test. She and Theo had been trying for a few months, hoping to give Mason a sibling, but seeing the actual proof made it feel suddenly, wonderfully real. She found Theo in his office, reviewing reports for an upcoming board meeting. "Do you have a minute? For you? Always." He closed his laptop, giving her his full attention. "What's up?" She handed him the test without saying anything, watching his face carefully. His eyes widened, then filled with tears, then broke into the biggest smile she'd ever seen. "We're having a baby," he whispered. "We're having a baby," she confirmed. He stood, pulling her into his arms and spinning her around, both of them laughing and crying at once. Then he set her down carefully as if she might break. "Are you happy?" she asked, needing to hear it. "Happy doesn't even begin to cover it," he said. "Willa, you've given me everything. You, Mason, our life together. And now this. I'm the luckiest man alive." They told Mason that evening over his favorite dinner, spaghetti and meatballs. Theo had insisted on making a whole production of it with a wrapped box containing a Big Brother t-shirt. Mason opened it, read the shirt, and looked at them with confused excitement. "I'm going to be a big brother." "You are," Willa said. "What do you think about that?" He launched himself at her, careful not to hug too hard. "I think it's the best thing ever. I'm going to teach them everything I know. Can I help pick the name? When do they get here? Will they like Daisy?" Theo laughed. "Slow down, buddy. They won't be here for about 7 more months, and yes, you can definitely help with the name." The pregnancy was smooth. and Theo was attentive to the point of being slightly overbearing. He insisted Willa stop doing any heavy lifting, hired additional household help so she could rest, and accompanied her to every single doctor's appointment. When they found out they were having a girl, Mason immediately began planning all the things he'd teach his little sister. Theo seemed to walk on air for weeks after learning they were having a daughter. "A little girl," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We're going to have a daughter. She's going to have you wrapped around her finger before she's even born," Willa teased. "Absolutely," he agreed without shame. "Just like her mother has me wrapped around her finger." Their daughter, Violet Teresa Grayson, was born on a snowy December morning. She had Theo's eyes and Willa's dark hair, and the moment the nurse placed her in Willa's arms, their family felt complete. Mason was allowed in shortly after, and he approached his new sister with reverent awe. "She's so small," he whispered. "Can I hold her?" Theo helped position Mason safely, then carefully transferred Violet into his arms. Mason looked down at her with absolute love. "Hi, Violet," he said softly. "I'm your big brother. I'm going to protect you forever." Willa met Theo's eyes over their children's heads, and the love she saw there made her heart overflow. This man, this beautiful family, this life, it was more than she'd ever imagined possible. The early months with a newborn were exhausting but joyful. Theo took paternity leave from work, insisting his executives could handle things for a few weeks. He was a natural with Violet, patient through the sleepless nights, always ready with a bottle or a diaper change. Mason was an incredible big brother, always wanting to help, to hold her, to make her smile. Even Daisy seemed to understand that Violet was precious, lying protectively near her bassinet. One night, when Violet was about 3 months old, Willa found Theo in the nursery at 2 in the morning, holding their daughter and swaying gently. She stood in the doorway, watching him whisper to Violet about all the things they'd do together, all the ways he'd protect her, all the love he had for her mother and brother. "You're a wonderful father," Willa said softly. Theo looked up, his face softening when he saw her. "I learned from watching you. You showed me what real love looks like, Willa. Unconditional, fierce, unwavering. Everything I know about being a parent I learned from you." She crossed the room and wrapped her arms around both of them. "We learned together. We're still learning." "And we'll keep learning," Theo said, "for the rest of our lives, together." As the years passed, their family only grew stronger. Mason excelled in school, eventually getting into a prestigious prep academy where Theo had connections. He never forgot where he came from, though, often reminding his friends that his mom had been a single parent working multiple jobs before she married his dad. Violet grew into a spirited, intelligent little girl who indeed had Theo wrapped around her finger. She was fearless and curious, always asking questions, always wanting to understand how things worked. Theo said she'd probably run his company someday, and Willa didn't doubt it. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Theo planned a surprise trip, just the two of them, with Patricia and her husband watching the kids. He took Willa to the coast, to a beautiful resort where they could walk on the beach and remember what it was like before children, before responsibilities. "Do you ever miss it?" Willa asked as they sat on their private balcony watching the sunset. "Your life before, when it was simpler?" "Never," Theo said firmly. "That wasn't a life, Willa. That was just existence. This you, the kids, the chaos, the love this is living, you gave me that." "We gave each other that," she corrected. He pulled her closer. "Do you know what I think about sometimes? That day you showed up for the interview, you were so nervous, trying so hard to be professional, but I could see the strength in you, the determination. I hired you because Patricia said you were qualified, but I kept you in my life because I couldn't imagine it without you." "I was terrified," Willa admitted. Everything was falling apart and that job felt like my last chance. I never imagined it would lead to all this. Fate, Theo said. Or destiny. Or just incredible luck. Whatever it was, I'm grateful for it every single day. They renewed their vows on that trip, just the two of them and an officiant on the beach at sunset. No guests, no big production, just promises spoken from the heart. I vow to keep choosing you, Willa said, tears streaming down her face. Every day in every way. You're my partner, my love, my home. Thank you for seeing me when I felt invisible. Thank you for loving not just me but my son, for making us a family. Thank you for giving me Violet, for building this beautiful life with me. I love you more than words can express. Theo's voice was thick with emotion as he responded. I vow to spend every day proving I deserve you. You walked into my life and changed everything, made everything better. You're the strongest person I know, and loving you is the greatest privilege of my life. I promise to always see you, to always choose you, to always be here. You're my everything, Willa, my absolute everything. When they returned home, Mason and Violet had made a banner reading, "Welcome home, Mom and Dad," and insisted on showing them all the things they'd done that week. Daisy, now graying around the muzzle, wagged her tail enthusiastically at their return. That night, after the kids were in bed, Willa and Theo stood in the kitchen where they'd had so many important conversations, where their relationship had really begun to shift from employer-employee to something more. Remember when I was just your housekeeper, Willa mused. When I thought the best I could hope for was keeping this job and giving Mason a stable home, you were never just my housekeeper, Theo said. From the very beginning, you were so much more. I just had to figure out how to tell you. I'm glad you did, she said. I'm glad you took that chance on us. Best decision I ever made, Theo assured her. Well, that and getting Daisy. Mason would never forgive me if I didn't credit the dog. Willa laughed, and Theo pulled her into his arms, dancing slowly to music only they could hear. Outside, the estate grounds sparkled with landscape lighting. Upstairs, their children slept safely in their beds. In the yard, Daisy dozed in her favorite spot. It was ordinary and extraordinary all at once. A life built not on grand gestures or fairy tale magic, but on trust, hard work, and choosing each other every single day. Willa had come to this estate desperate and afraid, willing to do anything to give her son a better life. She'd found so much more than a job. She'd found a partner who saw her worth, a family that felt like destiny, a love that transformed everything. And every morning when she woke up beside Theo, when she heard Mason and Violet laughing somewhere in the house, when Daisy bounded up to greet her with unconditional joy, Willa felt grateful beyond measure. She'd been searching for stability, for survival. Instead, she'd found home. She'd found everything. Years later, at Mason's high school graduation, Willa stood between Theo and 13-year-old Violet, watching their son because he was theirs, fully and completely accept his diploma with honors. He'd been accepted to multiple prestigious universities and was planning to study environmental engineering, inspired by Theo's work in renewable energy. After the ceremony, Mason found them in the crowd and pulled them all into a group hug. "Thank you," he said, looking at Theo specifically. "For choosing us, for being my dad when you didn't have to be." "I've never done anything I didn't have to do," Theo said gruffly, emotion thick in his voice. "Being your father has been the greatest honor of my life, Mason. I'm so proud of you." "I love you, Dad," Mason said, and Willa saw Theo's eyes fill with tears. "I love you too, son." That night back at home, Willa found Theo in his office, the same room where he'd interviewed her all those years ago. So much had changed since then. The scared, desperate woman she'd been felt like a different person. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "How lucky I am," Theo said simply. "How my life could have gone so differently if you hadn't walked through that door." "Our life," Willa corrected, sitting on his lap. "Not just yours." "Ours. Our life," he agreed, kissing her softly. "The one we built together, the one I want to keep building with you for the next 50 years. Only 50, she teased. "Fine. Forever. I want forever with you, Willa Grayson." "You've got it," she promised. "You've always had it." "From that first interview, even when I didn't know it yet, I think my heart knew you were it for me. My person. My home." Outside, the estate grounds stretched into darkness, beautiful and vast. Inside, their home was filled with warmth and love, and the beautiful chaos of the family they'd created together. Willa had come here looking for a job, for a way to survive. She'd found everything instead. A husband who cherished her, children who thrived, a life that felt like a gift every single day she'd been hired to take care of his house. Instead, they'd taken care of each other, built something real and lasting and true. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better than that. It was real love, the kind that lasted. The kind that transformed everything. The kind that made every struggle, every fear, every hard day worth it. Willa had learned that sometimes the things you need most find you when you're not even looking. Sometimes strength isn't about doing everything alone, it's about letting someone stand beside you. Share the load. Build something beautiful together. And as she sat there in Theo's arms, in the home they shared, with their children safe and happy down the hall, Willa knew with absolute certainty that this was exactly where she was meant to be. Not because a prince had rescued her, but because two people had chosen each other, chosen love, chosen to build something real. That was the real magic. Not fate or destiny, but choice. Choosing love, choosing each other, choosing to stay. And they would keep choosing each other every day for the rest of their lives. That was their happy ending, and their happy beginning, and everything in between.